The violinist who turned a Gothic castle into a murder stage, a complete psychological autopsy of a genius killer before suicide. 6 ways to guard your mental boundaries. Hey brothers and sisters, welcome back to the channel. I'm your old pal, and tonight, let's dim the lights a bit. I mean, really dim them. Grab that mug of coffee, or maybe something a little stronger if you've got it, because we're going to talk about a true story that, even years after I first dug into the case files, still sends a cold spike right down my spine. Picture this: a century-old Gothic castle. Not the cleaned-up tourist trap kind, but the kind that's genuinely eerie and breathtakingly gorgeous. Candlelight flickers against stone walls that have seen centuries of secrets. The air is thick with the scent of aged oak, dusty velvet, and the faint, almost decaying sweetness of dying roses. And there, in the center of the grand hall, stands a violin prodigy. He draws his bow across the strings, and a melody comes out that's so sorrowful, so haunting, it feels like the room itself is weeping. The audience, dressed in their finest gowns and tuxedos, holds their breath. They're not just listening, they're being consumed. But here's the twist that turns this from a fairy tale into a nightmare. After every single one of these exclusive concerts, someone from that audience vanishes. Or worse, they're found the next morning in the foggy forest outside the castle walls, posed like a piece of art. And the final act? The violinist didn't get caught by the cops. He climbed to the highest tower, and with the very same bowstring that produced those divine sounds, the string that had likely touched the necks of others, he ended his own life. A final grim cadenza. This isn't a pitch for a Netflix limited series. This is a real, documented tragedy of genius that happened in Europe. It's a case where music wasn't just the soundtrack, it was the weapon, the motive, and the escape plan. Today, I want you to imagine we're sitting in a speakeasy hidden deep inside this castle, and I'm an FBI profiler laying out the evidence on a sticky oak table. We're going to conduct a complete psychological autopsy of this genius killer, Victor Randall. How does a man who can touch heaven with a melody end up orchestrating hell? What was the exact thought process in that split second when the bowstring tightened around his own throat? And stick with me until the end, because I've got 6 actionable, practical ways to build a fortress around your own mind, so that the pressure of your Silicon Valley deadlines or NFL-sized responsibilities doesn't ever push you toward that same dark, self-destructive edge. Got your coffee? Let's walk through the gate of this castle. The maestro and his deadly stage. Our main character, let's call him Victor Randall, was in his early 30s. He was born with a silver spoon in his mouth and a Stradivarius in his crib, metaphorically speaking. A musical dynasty family. Pressure from day one. They called him the Hand of God. And honestly, from the surviving recordings I've heard, the nickname was earned. He could make the violin weep. He could make it laugh with a manic, unsettling joy. He could make you forget you were sitting in a drafty room in the 21st century and transport you to some other plane of existence. When he hit it big, he did what any eccentric genius with too much money would do. He bought a crumbling, abandoned Gothic castle. Not for the resale value, not to flip it on HGTV. He wanted a sanctuary. He converted the Grand Hall into an acoustically perfect private concert venue, and he made it exclusive. Painfully exclusive. 1 performance a quarter, invitation only. The guest list was a who's who of the elite. Billionaire tech moguls who looked bored with life, celebrated artists who thought they'd seen it all, and the most vicious, pen-wielding music critics in Europe. Everyone would arrive in their finery. They'd sip vintage champagne. The candles would be lit, casting long dancing shadows on the walls. Victor would step onto the stage, bow slightly with that gentle, almost shy smile and play. It was so quiet you could hear the crackle of the wax and the thumping of hearts. At the end, he'd look out and his eyes would say, "I have given you my soul." Now, bro, I know what you're thinking. That sounds like the ultimate Friday night. That's the peak of human experience, right? Like finding that perfect corner spot in a Starbucks with your favorite playlist and a latte that's exactly the right temperature. You think you've arrived. You think you're safe. But underneath that silky veneer of high art, a completely different score was being composed. A score written in blood. The location of the castle was a character in this crime. Victor told the press it was chosen because the ancient stone makes the music resonate with the soul. And maybe that was true, but it was also true that the place was in the middle of nowhere. Cell service? 0 bars. Police response time? Maybe by horse and carriage the next morning? It was the perfect, isolated stage for a private performance where the audience participation was involuntary. He had a ritual that everyone found charming. He would prepare a short, exclusive melody for a select guest of the evening. After the main recital, he'd find you in the crowd, look you deep in the eyes, play these few haunting bars just for you, and whisper, "This one only belongs to you." People would weep with gratitude. They felt chosen. They felt seen by a genius. They never connected the dots that the people who felt most seen were the ones who were never seen alive again. It wasn't until the mother of a young pianist reported her daughter missing that the police started connecting the dots. The first victim. She was found in the woods behind the castle. She was suspended from a low branch, a piece of fine-gauge violin string wrapped meticulously around her throat. She had been the recipient of a special dedication the night before. Then came the second concert, and the third. The patterns emerged. Strangulation by bowstring, or wounds that mimicked the slashes and rests of a musical score. The tabloids had a field day. They called it the Fortress of the Fatal Melody. The Chateau of the Cutting Cord. Victor, he just kept smiling and kept announcing the next season's dates. Are you starting to feel that prickle on the back of your neck? That's the feeling of the beautiful becoming the terrifying. Inside the mind of the maestro of murder. All right, let's dim the lights further. Let's go from the crime scene photos to the autopsy of the soul. I want to walk you through what was actually firing in Victor's neural pathways. Because this guy wasn't your textbook Ted Bundy. He wasn't driven by a compulsion for power over the weak in the same way. Victor had sublimated his entire existence into his art. Psychology has a term for when this goes wrong. Failed sublimation. In a healthy mind, you take that primal, negative energy, the rage at your boss, the grief of a breakup, the anxiety of existence, and you channel it into the canvas, the guitar, the code you're writing. It becomes fuel for creation. It's a release valve. But for Victor, the valve was jammed. Instead of the music releasing the darkness started corrupting the music. He reached a point where just playing the notes wasn't enough. He needed the listener to become the note. A note that stops. Let me paint you a picture of his Monday morning routine. He's not thinking about traffic. He's standing in line at a coffee shop, looking at the people around him, and his internal monologue is something like, "They hear me play, they applaud, but they don't understand the sacrifice. They don't understand the perfection. They are just noise in the grand concert hall of my life. Only by removing the noise can the melody be truly pure." This is where the childhood backstory becomes crucial. His father was a tyrant of a music teacher. Not the inspiring kind, the kind who locks you in a practice room until your fingers bleed. Perfection wasn't a goal in that household. It was the minimum requirement to avoid punishment. As an adult, Victor couldn't tolerate ordinary listeners. He couldn't handle the vulnerability of being judged by people he secretly deemed inferior. So he found a way to flip the script. He became the ultimate critic. Murder wasn't an act of rage. It was, in his twisted manifesto, an act of aesthetic purification. He was editing the audience. He was removing the discordant notes from his symphony. He would watch the crowd during the concert. He was profiling them. Who was lost in the music? Who had that look of deep, vulnerable yearning? Often, it was the person who reminded him most of his younger, pre-trauma self. And that exclusive melody he played for them, that wasn't a gift. That was the trapdoor. It was a form of auditory hypnosis, a trigger that, when combined with whatever post-concert interaction he had planned, disarmed the victim's survival instincts. He turned the most beautiful thing in the world, a song just for you, into a weapon of execution. Holy crap, that's how the human brain flips from beauty to horror without you even noticing. One moment you're hearing angels, the next you're meeting them. The most chilling part? He had total cognitive clarity, but it was wrapped in a thick layer of narcissism. He knew the law. He knew the morality. He just didn't think it applied to him. He was the composer of a reality that others were just living in. This is a dynamic we see in Silicon Valley all the time, isn't it? The founder who works 120 hours a week, drives his team into burnout and justifies it as changing the world. The developer who sees a glitch in the system of life and thinks the only solution is to delete the code. It's the cognitive dissonance that screams, "Only I see the truth." And if you're like me, working in a high-pressure environment where the KPIs are tightening around your neck like a bowstring, you have to ask yourself, could I ever get that lost in the sauce? Could my drive for the perfect project, the perfect body, or the perfect life ever morph into a justification for my own private dark theater? Honestly, it's a sobering thought, and that's why we're having this conversation. Victor ritualized everything. The music was the anesthetic, the bowstring was the scalpel. He wrote in his journal, and I'm paraphrasing the translated police evidence here, "The bow is my voice, the string is my silence, the death rattle is the purest chord there is." This is textbook displaced aggression, with an artistic glaze on top. The rage he should have felt toward his abusive father. The rage he should have directed at his own inner critic. He spun that energy outward and dressed it up in a tuxedo. It's not unlike watching an NFL linebacker. On the field, that guy is a guided missile of violence. It's legal. It's celebrated. He's taken every ounce of frustration from his life and launching it into the opponent. But then the game ends. The pads come off. And sometimes that void of purpose, that inability to turn off the aggression, leads to the real-life implosions we read about in the sports pages. And finally, the man who played judge, jury, and executioner for his audience turned that bowstring on himself. The final curtain call. After the last concert, where I suspect the audience could feel the air was different, heavier, he didn't mingle. He walked up the spiral stone staircase to the highest turret. He left a recording. The voice is calm, eerily calm. He says something along the lines of, "Tonight, the hall is empty. The listeners have gone home, but I remain. It occurs to me that the only listener who has never truly understood my final note is me. Only I am worthy to finish this composition perfectly." What was the final thought? It wasn't fear of handcuffs. He could have vanished. He was smart enough. It was the terror of the imperfect ending. This is the ultimate expression of the illusion of control. He had spent the last months of his life choreographing the deaths of others to prove he was the maestro of fate. If he let the police or the state decide his end, the music would stop on a wrong note. But if he chose the exact moment, the exact method, the bowstring of course, and the exact location, he would be the composer right up to the final beat. It's that same twisted dopamine hit. You see, when someone goes berserk on Black Friday, it's not about the toaster they're grabbing. It's about winning. It's about being the one who controls the outcome. For Victor, pulling the bowstring tight around his own neck wasn't surrender. In his mind, it was the most magnificent, breathtaking, perfect partie he had ever produced. And that brings us to you, brother. To us. Living in this pressure cooker of a world. You've got deadlines that feel like a blade against your skin. You've got family responsibilities that feel heavier than a castle wall. Do you ever, just for a fleeting second, think, if I just walked away, if I just pulled the emergency brake, it would all be quiet? That's the whisper of the same dark muse that sat on Victor's shoulder. And that's exactly why we don't just listen to scary stories. We learn from them. We build defenses. Your 6-week mental fortress workout. Let's move from the autopsy table to the gym. You can't just hear about a guy falling off a cliff and say, wow, scary. You have to build a railing. Here are 6 ways to build a railing around your psyche. Practice weekly like a workout for your soul. 1. The 101 freeway mental cruise control. Most of us commute on autopilot. Use that time. Once a week, on the highway, or during a long walk, ask yourself this specific question. What has my pressure been turning into lately? Is it turning into a sharp word toward your partner? A second glass of whiskey you didn't need? A fantasy about just disappearing? The goal isn't to judge yourself. It's to spot the red flag on the side of the road so you can ease off the gas pedal. Don't wait until you've hit the guardrail. 2. The Starbucks no sugar boundary exercise. Victor's problem was he let the sweet, the art, blend with the poison, the violence. You need to be specific. Spend just 5 minutes a day, literally the time it takes to order a coffee, and write down one boundary. Today, I absolutely will not let perfectionism ruin my dinner. Or today, I will not let my fantasy of quitting my job turn into a fantasy of self-harm. You tell the barista no sugar with confidence. Say no to your darkest intrusive thoughts with the same clarity. This is about labeling the poison so you don't drink it. 3. The NFL Weekly Emotion Review, Film Study. Every NFL team watches the game tape on Monday. Win or lose. They dissect every play. You should do this with your week. Set aside 30 minutes on a Sunday. Where did you almost fumble? Where did you almost blow up at someone? Where did you use a hobby or work to escape a feeling you should have just sat with? That Tuesday meeting, I felt my throat close up. I almost said something I'd regret. Film doesn't lie. Rewatching your week gives you an upgraded self-destruct radar for the week ahead. 4. The only I get it red flag alert. Victor's biggest tell was his isolation from reality. Here are the 3 sentences that should set off alarm bells in your own head. No one else understands what this really costs. It has to end perfectly or not at all. They just don't see the big picture. When you hear yourself thinking or saying these words, recognize it for what it is. The illusion of control creeping in. The moment that phrase enters your brain, that's your cue to call a friend. Not to talk about the problem necessarily, but just to hear a voice from outside the castle walls. 5. The healthy artistic sublimation method. The Victor antidote. Music failed Victor because he used it as a weapon instead of a bandage. You need to use your outlet correctly. If you're feeling dark, don't just listen to dark music that amplifies the echo chamber. Create something that physically moves the energy out of your body. Write it down on paper, then crumple it up and throw it in the trash. Paint an ugly, chaotic mess. Go for a run where you sprint until your lungs burn. You're literally metabolizing the poison so it doesn't stay stuck in your gut and ferment into a Victor Randall symphony. 6. The FBI intuition break check. The 10-second rule. Victor stood on that tower ledge and looked down. In that moment, the thought was action. Your brain needs a buffer zone. When an extreme thought appears, what if I just swerved into that pole? Or what if I just said the most unforgivable thing right now? Do this. Pause. 10 seconds. Breathe. And ask, if my best friend, my brother, just told me they were thinking this, what would I say? You'd say, bro, that's insane. That's the burnout talking. Put the phone down. Let's go get a burger. Next time you feel that dark urge to hit the gas, remember, hit the goddamn brakes. Victor Randall ended his life with a rest note that haunts me to this day. But it doesn't have to be our score. He showed us the extreme end of what happens when a brilliant mind is left unguarded. He showed us that talent is not a shield against the dark. So what's your biggest takeaway? Let me know in the comments. Are you going to try the NFL film study this weekend? Or are you implementing the Starbucks boundary tomorrow morning? I want to hear which of these 6 tools you're picking up first. If this deep dive into the dark side of human potential gave you chills, hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss the next case file, and ring that bell because we're just getting started with the vault. Stay safe, stay sharp, and remember, protect your mind. It's the only instrument you've got that's more precious than a Stradivarius. I'll see you next time. Hopefully somewhere less haunted.